Morals cannot be legislated, but behavior can be regulated. The law cannot make an employer love me, but it can keep him from refusing to hire me because of the color of my skin. Dr. Martin Luther King. That quote is on the first page of an important document that was released on February 1st of this year. This is probably the most important thing I've ever talked about. This is probably the most important thing I ever will talk about. This is probably one of the things I'm more passionate about ever, and out of any sports thing I've ever done, this is what I care about the most. Hi, my name is Chandler. This is Thinking Outside the Pylons, and today I'm going to be discussing the Brian Flores versus the NFL lawsuit. This was filed on February 1st, 2022. It was Brian Flores versus NFL and 3 NFL teams: the Miami Dolphins, the New York Giants, and the Denver Broncos. What I will be talking about today is what he believes is going on in the NFL, what they prove, and what they talk about in their lawsuit. I will be discussing all of this and taking it straight from the lawsuit. The document in question is a 58-page document. I did read every single page. I have saved what I thought is the most important parts of the document, even though the entire document is very important. I think that anyone should read it if you agree or disagree with Brian Flores. But I will be discussing it, especially this month being Black History Month. This is very important. This is something I'm very passionate about. This is something I really care about, and it is something that is very true and is very much happening in the NFL and places all across the world, most specifically in the US. And I'm going to read this quote one more time. Morals cannot be legislated, but behavior can be regulated. The law cannot make an employer love me, but it can keep him from refusing to hire me because of the color of my skin. And the fact that they put this on the first page, they actually talk about it. They do discuss it. In the first statement that they have on this, it states that as this class action complaint is filed on the first day of Black History Month, we honor the brave leaders that fought so hard to help break down racial barriers of injustice: Martin Luther King, Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, Frederick Douglass, Jackie Robinson, and Mamie Till, to name a few. So they are stating in this document, Brian Flores and his attorneys, that there is a racial injustice in the NFL towards Black, African-American, persons of color's head coaches specifically, and the opportunities that happen. Brian Flores believes that he was not fired because of his performance, but because of disagreements due to the color of his skin. He was not given the fair opportunity in Denver or in New York, and that the Rooney Rule that was created in the NFL, I believe in 2001, has not succeeded in any way, shape, or form since it became a thing. When the Rooney Rule became in effect in 2001, I believe there are 3 Black head coaches in the NFL. As of this moment, today, there's one Black head coach in the NFL. That one Black head coach being the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers that Rooney actually owns, Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin has also had 15 consecutive winning seasons, something that no one has ever surpassed or completed in previous NFL history. We are going backwards in the NFL. We are going in a place that does not make sense. It truly goes against what the NFL believes in and what they say they believe in, being a game, a sport that is a business that is represented by 80% of Black athletes and ran by 99% of white women and or men. There are 32 owners in the NFL. Well, 31 owners in the NFL, the Green Bay Packers being publicly traded, and one actual non-white owner being Shad Khan of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I am going to go through this document and hit the most important parts, like I said, and I will tell you how I feel and what I think can be done as someone, as a white male that truly does believe that this is all wrong. And I hope you enjoy this, because this is the most work I've ever put into anything. This is one thing I've been more passionate about than anything that I've ever done, because I know there are issues. I see the issues. And that's why I think this is the most important thing that I can ever speak on in my entire reporting career, I would say. I'm going to check each important spot, and I just want to understand for myself, and I want to explain to you how big of an impact this is for people of color, for the NFL, and for everyone in general. So the most important part to me in the next one is section 4. In certain ways, the NFL is racially segregated and is managed much like a plantation. Its 32 owners, none of whom are black, profits substantially from the labor of NFL workers, 70% of whom are black. The NFL owners watch the games from atop NFL stadiums in their luxury boxes, while their majority black workforce put their bodies on the line every Sunday, taking vicious hits and suffering debilitating injuries to their bodies and their brains, while the NFL and its owners reap billions of dollars. In certain critical ways, the NFL is racially segregated and managed much like a plantation. And you're going to say, oh, well, they make millions of dollars and this is what they do and they signed up for this, and you may be right about that. But at the end of the day, if you think about this average player making $2 million and a owner that owns a $3 billion organization, $3 billion to $2 million is a very small percentage, very small. I want you to think about that. That's like you having $100 and the person beside you having 2 pennies. Actually, at that, it's $300 and the person next to you have 2 pennies. You are in a stronger financial situation than that person. That is like you telling that person to run their head into the wall for more and more pennies while you gain more and more hundreds. And there are more parts about this that go deeper into that, but that is what this is based off, is that Brian Flores and his counsel, and this is a class action lawsuit, I must add, very important, class action. And that meaning is that anyone that has ever felt discriminated against, has felt hardship against, and ever having an opportunity in NFL as a coach and or player can step forward and join this class action. At the end of this entire document, they do talk about how if any person steps forward, these are their stanchions, these are what they're standing up for, this is what they're talking about, and we cover these people through this document. Class action lawsuit. And one of the most important parts to also talk about this is that this is actually asking for a jury. I'm going to make sure that I say this properly, because I believe it's in the last piece of the document. Jury demand. Plaintiff and the proposed class hereby demand trial by jury. They don't care about a judge's opinion on this. They want an actual jury, their peers, to look at this and make a decision upon. That is how big this is. That is how massive this is. But I continue. And why this is a part of the idea of slavery is that when you are working for a very minimum amount for what your job is, it is against the Human Rights Act stanchioned in every state. Every state has their own Human Rights Act. They are going against specific ones for specific states of New York, Colorado, and in Florida. They are going also for the Human Rights Act of America, and they are also showing ideas, descriptions, and proven facts about this exact thing too. This is a big deal. And at the same time, it is something that the NFL is facing, and it's something that black coaches do not have an opportunity for. And there's other research I did that is not in this document that I will be talking about as well later on. And it just gets deeper and deeper. I continue on to section 5. Many players desire to coach for post-playing careers. Others desire to work their way into management level positions at one of the NFL's 32 teams. Unfortunately for a black individual, that is easier said than done. Only one of the NFL 32 teams, 3%, employs a black head coach. Only 4 of the NFL 32 teams, 12%, employ a black offensive coordinator. Only 11 of the NFL 32 teams, 34%, employ a black defensive coordinator. Only 8 of the NFL teams, only 8 of the NFL's 32 teams, 25%, employ a black special teams coordinator. Only 3 of the NFL's 32 teams, 9%, employ a black quarterback coach, and only 6 of the NFL's 32 teams, 19%, employ a black general manager. These numbers come from a pool of players that is approximately 70% black. This is not by chance. Rather, the statistics above and those described throughout this complaint are a result of race discrimination. That's a big deal. 70% of your workforce is this. Roughly, if I'm trying to do quick math in my head and doing percentages, 17% of the people that control them are that same people. I want you to think about that. You go to work and you think about who you're dealing with, and your boss is telling you that this is the way, this is the way, this is the way, this is the way, and you have no connection to this person at all. This person has none of the same ideologies of you. The person doesn't look the same as you. This person doesn't live the same life that you've lived. It's literally black versus white. And they tell you everything you have to do. And if you don't do what they say, you are either fired or not given an opportunity to move up and proceed with your professional career. Tell me if that's a big deal in any profession. Tell me if you've ever felt discriminated in any profession or looked upon in a certain way because of what your boss or what someone else in your profession said to another person. Now try that when every single person feels the same way you do. And they're supposed to be given opportunities for those same people, and they are never given the opportunity. Never actually given the opportunity. And I want to continue. This is section 7. Vice President of Football Operations recently stated with regard to black head coaches. This comes from, I'm surprised they actually don't have this. Give me once. Troy Vincent, sorry. This comes from Troy Vincent. This was a quote that he said. There is a double standard, and we've seen that. And you talk about the appetite for what's acceptable. Let's just go back to Coach Dungy was let go in Tampa Bay after a winning season. Coach Wilkes, just after a few years prior, was let go after 1 year. Coach Caldwell was fired after a winning season in Detroit. It is part of the larger challenges that we have. But when you look over time, it's an over-indexing for men of color. These men have been fired after a winning season. How do you explain that? There is a double standard. I don't think that is something that we can shy away from, but that is a part of some of the things that we need to fix in the system. We want to hold everyone to why does one, let's say, get the benefit of the doubt to be able to build or take bumps and bruises in the process of getting a franchise turned around when others are not afforded that same latitude. We've seen that in history at a professional level. pretty much, to break that down, is that every time a head coach is hired, a white head coach is actually given an average of 3 seasons, I believe, to coach. I think that is actually in this document. And the average black coach is given 2 years. There has been 6 firings after a winning season since the year 2000. 4 of those coaches have been black. Oh, and you think, well, 2 of them are white, though. I mean, that's fair. I mean, but like 4 out of the 6 head coaches since the year 2000 that have had winning seasons that got fired were black. As of now, there is 1 black head coach in the NFL. Tell me exactly how those percentages work out. How many black head coaches do you think have been in the NFL since the year 2000? I did not do that part, but I'm telling you right now, it's not as many as white coaches. And only 2 coaches that are white have been fired after winning seasons, but 4 have been black, have been fired after winning seasons. One of which was Coach Tony Dungy, who ended up going to the Indianapolis Colts and actually winning a Super Bowl. Yeah. Given another opportunity, luckily somewhere else, was actually shown and proven that he can win, and actually was the first African American head coach to win a Super Bowl. Do you not see what is messed up in that situation? Do you not see that there's an issue in that situation, that there is such a small percentage, but more have been fired after a winning season? How do you even fathom that? And one of them was the head coach for the Chargers. I believe it was Schottenheimer, mutually agreed upon leaving the team. Not even a true firing, not like we fired him to change direction. Literally just mutually agreed to leave the team. Yeah, and I continue. The next part I want to talk about is number 9. Perhaps worst of all, in connection with its distribution of settlement monies to retirees who suffer from traumatic brain injury. The NFL insisted on applying so-called race norms, but simply the NFL took the position that white people simply have a better baseline cognitive function than black people. This is the very definition of racism, the assumption that someone is not as smart as another person because of the color of his or her skin. It is also perhaps explains why the NFL and its teams are so loath to hire black head coaches, coordinators, and general managers, just as for years the league has discriminated against black quarterbacks. Any specific black quarterback come to mind? I don't want to go too deep into, actually, I don't want to talk about exactly what they mean about the race norms. Actually, okay, let me rephrase that. What they mean about the race norms and what they mean about the traumatic brain injury is that during the CTE litigation and the decision to pay the players a compensation because of the fact that CTE was proven, concussion protocol was put into place, and that former players that were not given the same resources as players now deserve to be reimbursed for their injuries. They had specific tests that were ran by NFL approved doctors. And those NFL approved doctors all agreed that there is a specific mindset and cognitive mind. And what happened was that white players were deemed to have better cognitive ideologies, cognitive minds over black athletes. You think I'm joking? This is real. It is in this document, and it came out when they actually did the previous lawsuit for CTE issues, that they had improved doctors run specific tests, and if a black person did not score higher than the white person, they did not get the same compensation because they did not have the approved same cognitive mindset as that white person. If that doesn't anger you, directly to straight racism. You are literally saying black people are not as smart as white people. I can't even speak. I am angry. What? That is disgusting. For a league that is majority black, they are told that they are not as smart as the white person. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry. That is disgusting. I go to part 13. Start with part 12. I'm just going to read the first part of part 12. It has been nearly 20 years since the NFL implemented the Rooney Rule, purposely to combat with the utter lack of black coaches in the NFL. Number 13. The Rooney Rule may have been well-intended, although it was hard to attribute benevolence to the NFL given the complete lack of action that it has taken post-Rooney Rule to the remedy discrimination that it admits exists. However, well-intended or not, what is clear is that the Rooney Rule is not working. It is not working because the numbers of black head coaches, coordinators, and quarterback coaches are not even close to being reflected of the number of black athletes on the field. The Rooney Rule is also not working because management is not doing the interviews in good faith. That is important. And it therefore creates a stigma that interviews of black candidates are only being done to comply with the Rooney Rule rather than recognition of the talents that the black candidates possess. That is one of the most important topics in the entire document. Sorry, that was the most important sayings in this entire document. Is that management is not doing the interviews in good faith. I will get to the reason why that is important here for Brian Flores, because what they are saying is that head coaches are being interviewed. Black head coaches are being interviewed just to comply with the rule, with truly no chance at all. That the owners don't even think they are going to hire this black head coach, but they have to because it is in their contract. It is in the rule book. If they don't, they will be penalized. Rather than looking at a person as a true candidate, they're just walking into a room, asking a few questions, saying, oh, we interviewed him, and we really did care about this interview, but he just wasn't our guy. With no real reason to not actually consider this man other than the fact that he is black. I read the next part. In January, this is part 14. In January 2022, Mr. Flores, who spent 3 years as the head coach of the defendant Miami Dolphins Limited, the Dolphins or Miami, found himself without a job. He was fired by the Dolphins after leading the team to its first back-to-back winning season since 2003. This purported basis for his termination was alleged poor collaboration. In reality, the writing had been on the wall since Mr. Flores' first season as a head coach of the Dolphins, when he refused his owner's directive to tank for the first pick in the draft. Indeed, during the 2019 season, Miami's owner Stephen Ross told Mr. Flores that he would pay him $100,000 for every loss, and the team's general manager, Chris Greer, told Mr. Flores that Steve was mad that Mr. Flores' success in winning games that year was compromising the team's draft position. Stephen Ross, the owner of the Miami Dolphins, offered Brian Flores $100,000 to lose every single game, per game, $100,000 per game, $1.6 million, untaxable, here you go. And Brian Flores said no. Why? Because he was a competitor. Why? Because he was a good man. And why? Because he flat out just wasn't going to do it, is what he said. That I'm taking that from an interview that Brian Flores had recently on, I think it was Get Up, and he said that he would not do it. He did not take the money. He told Stephen Ross no. Obviously, Stephen Ross came out and said, this is blasphemy. This is the worst. This is not true. I would never say any of these things. I would never offer any of these things. And it's something that doesn't surprise me because this is a huge allegation. This is a very important allegation. This is very important to think about, is that if you are telling a coach to throw games, that has very big gambling implications, which the NFL is really pushing now as a gamble. And it has a lot of implications on other people's jobs, on athletes' jobs, and this is bigger than just Brian Flores at that point. This is the fact that the Miami Dolphins were throwing games just to get a high draft pick in which they cheated in a way. They threw games, and if you're a bettor, you don't like to hear that. You don't like to hear that a team in a sport in which people always talk about there's issues in throwing games are actually throwing games. After the end of the 2019 season, Mr. Ross began to pressure Mr. Flores to recruit a prominent quarterback in violation of league tampering rules. Mr. Flores repeatedly refused to comply with these improper directives. Undeterred, in the winter of 2020, Mr. Ross invited Mr. Flores onto a yacht for lunch. Shortly after he arrived, Mr. Ross told Mr. Flores that the prominent quarterback was conveniently arriving at the marina. Obviously, Mr. Ross had attempted to set up a purportedly impromptu meeting between Mr. Flores and the prominent quarterback. Mr. Flores refused the meeting and left the yacht immediately. After the incident, Mr. Flores was treated with disdain and held out as someone who was incompliant and difficult to work with. So there is a if you ever do job training and you have any kind of management, there's a quid pro quo. You do this for me, I'll do this for you. And I'm not going to say that's exactly quid quo pro, but it is, you didn't do something for me. Now I'm going to do something for you. So it's like the opposite. And Stephen Ross changed the way he felt more about Brian Flores in that situation because of what Brian Flores did, that he said he didn't want to go against tampering violations. Tampering violations can have huge implications on your season. You can be fined, you can lose draft picks, you can lose capital. There's a lot of things you can lose if you tamper with a player that is signed to another team, or it is not a free agent, or is not an opportunity to actually be talked to. And yeah, that is probably one of the worst things you can do in the NFL, even though most teams do it. But it's not usually so blatantly and against the head coach's wishes. I want to continue. Number 16. From that point, Mr. Flores was ostracized and ultimately he was fired. He subsequently defamed throughout the media and the league that he was labeled by the Dolphins brass as someone who was difficult to work with. This is reflected of an all too familiar angry black man. Stigma that is often cast upon black men who are strong in their morals and convictions, while white men are coined as passionate for those very same attributes. A perfect example of this, and actually not a perfect example, just like a situation, a scenario, is saying like, I feel angry when someone fights me. I want to punch them. I want to retaliate. As a white man, I am fighting for my life. For a black man to do that, he is an angry person that doesn't understand how to self-defend, and he is trying to hurt or destroy that person that is trying to hurt them because he is black. Because he is black. I'm thinking a lot, and I have more to say, and I'm waiting to the end. I want to get through this document, the most important parts, because again, like I said, there are more important parts, but I'm trying to think to myself what is important to me and what I really want to say, and I want to make this very clear at the halfway point of this, is that I support Brian Flores. I support a community that is a minority. I support Black History Month and the fact that I understand what comes with me being a white individual, being a white male individual at that. And I want to never disrespect anyone that has the right mindset, the right thought process. And to me, a lot of black people are looked at a specific way for no reason. There is no reason for it. It's truly this color of the skin, and that is America. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And it's disheartening for something I really do care about, which is the NFL still has these issues, and that's what hurts me more. And that's why this is very important to me. That I believe we need to do more as football fans, as the NFL. We need to do more to support our brothers and our sisters and anyone that is involved, because we are a community, we are a family. And it's unfortunate that one part of our family, which makes a large portion of our family, is discriminated so harshly against. Yeah, I'm going to continue. Number 17. Thus last week, defendant New York Football Giants Inc., the Giants or the New York Giants, had an opportunity to move a step in the right direction, if even only one. The Giants had a chance to hire Mr. Flores, an eminently qualified black man, to be the first black head coach in the Giants' nearly 100-year history. Instead, the New York Giants made the decision to hire Brian Daboll and disclosed that decision to third parties during a time when the Giants were scheduled to still interview Mr. Flores, and when Mr. Flores was deceptively led to believe that he actually had a chance at this job. Thus, on Wednesday, January 26, 2022, Mr. Flores was forced to sit through a dinner with Joe Schoen, the Giants' new general manager, knowing that the Giants had already selected Mr. Daboll. Much worse, on Thursday, January 27, 2022, Mr. Flores had to give an extensive interview for a job that he already knew that he would not get. An interview that was held for no reason other than for the Giants to demonstrate falsely to the league commissioner Roger Goodell and the public at large it is in compliance with the Rooney Rule. The Giants would likely have gotten away with this most indicious form of discrimination if the New England Patriots head coach Bill Belichick had not mistakenly disclosed it to Flores in the below text messages. So I know I'm talking a lot, I'm reading a lot, and I'm not explaining a lot. Pretty much what Brian Flores is saying there is that he was told these text messages I'm about to tell you that Brian Daboll was hired before Brian Flores even stepped into the building for the New York Giants. Before he even interviewed, they already chose their person, and the only reason Brian Flores was being interviewed was to agree upon the Rooney Rule that was put in place by the NFL. That's the only reason why Brian Flores was there, was to comply with the rule and was not given a fair opportunity. These are the tweets between Brian Flores and Bill Belichick. Sounds like you have landed. Congrats. Did you hear something I didn't hear? Giants, ? With a bunch of question mark and exclamation marks. I have an interview on Thursday. I think I have a shot at it. Got it. I hear from Buffalo and New York Giants that you are their guy. Hope it works out if you want it to. That's definitely what I want. I hope you're right, coach. Thank you. Later text. Coach, are you talking to Brian Flores or Brian Daboll? Just making sure. Sorry, I fucked this up. I double checked and I misread the text. I think they are naming Daboll. I'm sorry about that. Thanks, Bill. Why the hell does Bill Belichick know who the Giants are hiring before the Giants are hiring them? Why is this not even a why and are they hiring someone without even interviewing someone, and why does a general manager, head coach of another team even know about it? I know Bill has a long history with the New York Giants. He did coach there. But why do they know that Brian Daboll is being implemented as a head coach before Brian Flores is even interviewed? Why? Now, obviously, the New York Giants came out and said, no, this is all false. We didn't make a decision. We didn't make a decision until after all the interviews were done. Blase, you know how it goes. And pretty much Brian Flores has just been said that he is making up all these claims. There is no stance to it. Within an hour, 1 hour, 1 hour of this 58-page document that took me about an hour to read because I don't know how to read, within the hour, the NFL released a statement that there is no merit to this lawsuit. How do you know there is no merit to this lawsuit if you haven't read it? How do you know? Because there is a lot of good arguments, even if they are not true for a lot of the things, there are a lot of good arguments regardless of things in this document that you wouldn't even have read within that hour to say that there is no merit. That is the issue with this entire situation with the NFL. There is a part here where this was not the first sham interview that Flores attended. Quote, Section 21. Incredibly, this was not Mr. Flores' first sham interview that was held only in an effort to comply with the Rooney Rule. Indeed, in 2019, Mr. Flores was scheduled to interview with the Denver Broncos. However, the Broncos' then general manager, John Elway, president and chief executive officer, Joe Ellis, and others showed up an hour late to the interview. They looked completely disheveled, and it was obvious that they were drinking heavily the night before. It was clear from substance of the interview that Mr. Flores was interviewed only because of the Rooney Rule, and the Broncos never had intention to consider him as a legitimate candidate for the job. Shortly after Vic Fangio, a white man was hired for the head coaching of the Broncos. So he got to Denver. He waited in a room for an hour to have lunch with them. They all came in. They did not care about the interview. The wrong person was actually asking the questions. Like wasn't the person that was important to ask the questions, according to Brian Flores. That's what the way I got of it when he did another interview. And it was just a sham interview to go with the Rooney Rule. I don't have much more to say about it because it just goes with everything else that's happening, everything else that he's saying, that it is truly just wrong. It's just wrong. He wasn't interviewed for the job. He was interviewed because he was black, and they needed to put him in. They needed to check a box, and that's what Brian Flores was checking a box. That's all it was. Among the other reliefs sought, Mr. Flores seeks the following injunctive relief: increase the influence of black individuals in hiring and termination decisions for general manager, head coach, and offensive and defensive coordinator positions. Ensure diversity of ownership by creating and funding a committee dedicated to sourcing black investors to take majority ownership and stakes in the NFL. Ensure diversity of decision-making by permitting select black players and coaches to participate in the interview process for general manager, head coach, and offensive and defensive coordinator positions. Increase objectively of hiring and termination decisions for the general manager, head coach, and offensive and defensive coordinator positions. Require NFL teams to reduce to writing the rationale for hiring and termination decisions, including a full explanation of the basis for any subjective influences. Why did you fire Brian Flores? Why? Give actual, factual things of why you fired Brian Flores, not just that he didn't fit the team mold. Require NFL teams to consider side-by-side comparison of objective criteria such as past performance, experience, and objective qualifications. This is my favorite part, guys. I did research. Guess what? I did research. The New York Giants hired Brian Daboll. That's a fact. I'm going to give you stats of 4 people. 4. And so let me just restart this. The New York Giants hired a new head coach. I'm going to give you stats of 4 coaches that are in the NFL, and I want you to decide which coach that you want. The first coach has a record of 15-15 as a coordinator. He has 1 Super Bowl win and also a conference championship win. The next head coach is 33-21 as a coordinator. He has won a Super Bowl as a coordinator. Another coach is a head coach and has a record of 24-25 with 2 winning seasons. The last coach is 57-72 as a coordinator with 0 Super Bowls and 0 conference championships. One of these coaches is now a head coach in the NFL. The other 3 coaches are black. Can you guess which ones? If you said number 1 as a head coach, you were wrong. He is black. If you said coach number 2, you are wrong. He is not a head coach. He is black. If you said coach number 3, you were wrong. He is not a head coach. He is black. Coach number 4, who has a record of 57-72 as an offensive coordinator in his career, is the newest head coach of the New York Giants, Brian Daboll. And I am not saying Brian Daboll is a bad coach, but I am saying that there is not equal opportunity for Byron Leftwich, Eric Bieniemy, and Brian Flores. Simple as that. Brian Daboll has a team that he operates over with Josh Allen, one of the best quarterbacks that we will talk about in 15 years is one of the best all time. Byron Leftwich is the offensive coordinator of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and ran a great offense with the GOAT. Y'all want to talk about how incredible and amazing and the best ever that Tom Brady was, but you won't give credit to his offensive coordinator. But we love Josh McDaniel, who is now the head coach for the Las Vegas Raiders. We'll love him, but we won't talk about Byron Leftwich. Why? Because he's black. Who's also a quarterback in the NFL, who's worked under Jack Del Rio, who's worked under Mike Tomlin, who's worked under, with Ben Roethlisberger, who's worked with Bruce Arians, who's worked with Tom Brady. Why isn't he a head coach in the NFL? Eric Bieniemy, who is the coach of one of the best offenses of all time in Kansas City, with Patrick Mahomes as his quarterback, with one of the best coaches in the NFL history, Andy Reid, who created incredible offensive concepts with great window dressing and has worked with one of the best offensive minds of Andy Reid. Why isn't he a head coach? Brian Flores, who worked with Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. Yo, your guys, the dynasty. Oh, it's the dynasty. The greatest teams ever. Most amazing teams ever. The New England Patriots. Y'all love them so much, but Brian Flores got fired for having 2 winning seasons back to back. For who? Brian Daboll, who did coach with the Patriots the same time that Brian Flores did, but was an offensive coordinator in Buffalo, was an offensive coordinator in Cleveland, was an offensive coordinator for Miami, was an offensive coordinator somewhere else, Kansas City. And his teams had records of 5-11, 4-12, 6-10, 2-14, 6-10, 10-6, 13-3, and 11-6. And didn't get good until one player, Josh Allen, actually got there. And honestly, the offensive scheme is really not that freaking good. It's actually pretty ass, to be honest with you. It's 3 routes and Josh Allen throws a bullet. That is their offense. That is the issue. That is what's wrong. That is the problem, is that. Before I go on, I want to see if there's any more parts. I'm just trying to make sure. I'm going to go to the history. There it talks about in this, the actual parties of this. To me, that is, it's Denver Broncos, Miami Dolphins, New York Giants, and the NFL. Those are the parties, as well as Brian Flores and the entire any person that wants to step forward because it's a class action lawsuit. Factual allegations. This is important. The history of race discrimination in the NFL. This is probably the last thing I want to get into because I want to talk about how I feel about everything. I'm just making sure that there's nothing else that I am missing. There's so much I saved. It's not even funny. It is literally too much to read. It is just too much. It is literally too much. Regardless, I want to get into the history of this, and then I'm going to speak candidly, like I have been, about how else I feel. The history of race discrimination in the NFL. The NFL has a tortured and unacceptable history with race relations that requires immediate focus in the first instance. The league remains mired in a culture that lacks inclusivity and where a barrier to entry still exists today for black professionals in leadership. The first iteration of the NFL began in 1920, and it was rife with racism. From 1920 through 1926, a total of 9 black players were permitted into the league from 1920 to 1926. At that time, the only reason black players were permitted at all was because the then existing teams had difficulty filling out their rosters in the league's early days. Heading in 1927 season, all 5 of the remaining black players at the time left the league, and from 1927 to 1933, only a handful of black players were permitted to participate. Indeed, during that time frame, there was no more than 1 black player in the league per year. In 1933, the league had only 2 black players, but they had left at the end of the year, leaving the NFL with 0. At this point, the NFL was reportedly financially viable and no longer needed black players to fill vacant positions. At this point, the NFL was reportedly financially viable to pay white people and no longer needed black players to fill vacant positions because black people were playing for less. This led to one of the most despicable moments in the history of professional sports in the United States. It was widely accepted that the NFL used the absence of black players as an opportunity to impose a gentleman's agreement to ban black players entirely. This initiative was led by the Washington football team's owner, George Preston Marshall. The league's other founding owners, including but not limited to Tim Mara of the New York Giants, appear to have colluded and cooperated in this widespread racial ban. It was not until 1946 that black players re-entered professional football. From 1933 to 1946, there were no black players in the NFL because of a gentleman's agreement. However, the re-entry of black players into the league was not the result of introspection and a commitment to equality. Rather than the Cleveland Rams moved to Los Angeles and the publicly funded playing venue, the Los Angeles Coliseum, forced the Rams to integrate at least 1 black player in order to comply with the Supreme Court's decision in Plessy versus Ferguson that banned segregation in places of public accommodation. So the only reason why black people were allowed to be in the NFL was that the NFL had the Rams move to LA, and the Supreme Court justice passed again that law of Plessy versus Ferguson that black people have to be a part of the community and not segregated in a publicly owned space. In fact, it was reported that during a meeting between local officials, community activists, and the Rams general manager, Charles F. Walsh, Mr. Walsh admitted to the unwritten racist gentleman's agreement of barring of black players. As it would happen, the Rams ultimately signed 2 black players for the 1946 season, but two more years would go by before any other team would sign a black player. So from 1933 now to 1948, only 1 team had black players on it, and they were forced to have black people on the team. As of 1950, fewer than half of the NFL's 10 teams had signed a black player, and it was not until more than a decade later that the Washington football signed its first black player. So from 1920 to 1960, the Washington football team, which was known as the Washington Redskins, which had to be changed because of racial discrimination for the name, did not have any black people on it. Shocker, is that not? In 1959, 13 years later, after the start of integration, only 12% of the league's players were black. Even as integration slowly progressed, the stain of racism persisted. Teams reportedly put unwritten quotas on how many black players could be signed, and often teams would stack black players at the same position so that they would be eliminated as a matter of competition and roster cuts. It was also reported that black players received less compensation than their white counterparts. I mean, come on. Like, this is literally, that's normal. That is literally America. Like women's suffrage, black suffrage. Literally. the fact that minorities do not get paid as much as the white man, that we are still fighting in 2022, is that not insane? Oh my God. The NFL only engaged in genuine full-scale racial integrations when it became economically necessary due to the outrage and protest from writers and fans, the emergence of the rival and more racially progressive leagues such as the All-American Football Conference, AAFC, and the American Football League, and the success of numerous minority athletes in college football. Black athletes started winning Heismans in NCAA. The NFL wasn't taking them, so that they said that we need black people because they're good at the sport. Of course, integration was hardly the end of black struggle in the NFL. Untold forms of discrimination still followed black players from team to team, city to city, stadium to stadium, and hotel to hotel. In fact, though the NFL had integrated 23 years when the Washington owner, Mr. Marshall, died in 1969, he apparently, fun fact, I can't speak, and I actually have a speech impediment, so I'm trying my best, stipulated that his estate be used to establish the Redskins Foundation on the condition that it was barred from spending money for any purpose which supports or employs the principle of racial integration in any form. Literally, you're not allowed to do anything for a minority. You can only do it for white people. If you don't get my money. The NFL has profited immensely from the racial integration of its players. Initially considered a second-tier sport, the NFL has thrived as an integrated league over the last 75 years. While the NFL was forced to racially integrate its players to generate these immense profits, it was not enforced to do so in any areas, so it did not. It took approximately 20 years for the NFL to hire its first black official, Burl Toller. It was widely known by even casual NFL fans that it took until the 1980s, approximately 40 years for integration, for teams to genuinely accept black players at quarterback positions, i.e. Warren Moon and Randall Cunningham, two of the best quarterbacks of all time, who just so happened to be black. Just so happened to be black. It took 43 years for the first black head coach to be hired, Art Shell. It took 54 years for an NFL team to hire a black general manager, Ozzie Newsome. Now, 76 years following integration, there has never been a black commissioner and there has never been a black majority owner of an NFL team. For a league and its team owners who have profited immensely of the talent of black players, the NFL has never fully acknowledged its history of racism or taken appropriate steps to address the racial disparities. As a black sports writer once wrote, persons, corporations, or businesses almost always forget the people or incidents that made them big. The NFL took all the aid the colored American could give them, and then, as soon as it became big league, promptly put a bar up against the very backbone of its existence. Case in point, Mr. Marshall, in many ways, the personification of the NFL's deep institutional racism, is enshrined in the NFL Hall of Fame, and his contributions are lauded by the Hall of Fame's website, with only passing reference to the fact that he endured his share of criticism for not integrating his team until being forced to do so in 1962. That is, the NFL not even acknowledge, mostly less condemn, Mr. Marshall's role in the league's history with racism. Rather, it only notes that he received criticism from others. So, the league has history of racism. Our country has a history of racism, but for some reason, racism just doesn't exist. It's not a thing. Right? We say racism doesn't exist, so it doesn't exist. We say it's not snowing outside in the middle of winter, so it's not snowing outside. There's an issue in the NFL. There's an issue in corporations. Now, he goes on to talk about Colin Kaepernick, which is discrimination towards him, and how when he knelt, and the president of the United States said that you should fire that son of a bitch, and that they talked about how any other coach or any other player that did what he did would be fined and prosecuted and would not be allowed to play. He also goes on to talk about the firing of John Gruden, and that it was he was given more of a grace to leave after saying terrible racial slurs and saying terrible things about other people in the emails that were released in the Washington football investigation for sexual harassment. The Washington football team is one of the worst organizations in American sports history, and it's absolutely disgusting. He also talks about the concussion settlement discriminated against black people's. That's black players. That's what I was talking about before when it came to the cognitive mind of a black person versus a white person. And then at the end of it, they talk about they just discuss what they actually want and what they believe can help us in the situation. They talk about which coaches are white, which coaches are black. It is a lot. I only read the first 15 pages out today. There is a lot to read in this. I do truly agree, truly believe that you should read this. They talk about the firing of certain black head coaches. So I'm going to go through this quickly. Jim Caldwell fired after winning seasons replaced by white coaches. They talk about the double standard treatment of Steve Wilkes when he was given a position that was absolutely impossible to actually do anything and was fired immediately. The fact that David Culley was literally just hired for absolutely no reason and was fired instantly. The fact that Chris Richard has never been hired as a head coach. Terrell Austin has never been hired as a head coach. Eric Bieniemy has never been hired as a head coach. So there's racism, and they go and talking about the class action lawsuit and what it actually stands for. There is a lot in this document, a lot. And I want to talk about a few points that I have because I do want my opinion to be said about this if it hasn't already. The NFL's fucked up. Simple as that. Racism is disgusting. Disgusting. The fact that black head coaches are not a thing, it's absolutely disgusting. It is. And this is what I really want to focus on, and this is why this is a big deal. Right now, for the Houston Texans, they just interviewed Josh McCown. If you don't know who Josh McCown is, that's fine. That's cool. Josh McCown has never been a coach in his entire career. He just retired in the NFL last year as a quarterback, and he is being interviewed as a head coach over, impossible to get the job over, qualified black head coaches. Do you realize how messed up that is? Do you realize this man has never coached, but he is more already looked at than black head coaches? That is disgusting. And these are I'm going to tell you the ways that I think you can fix this in my opinion, but before I do that, the NFL released a top 100 players list last year and talking about its 100-year anniversary, and 51 of the 100 players that were announced are black players. I think they actually did 9 head coaches, and shockingly, none of them were black. So you're saying to me that you can be the majority and best players. You can be the majority of the league, but you cannot run the league. That is fucked up. That is disgusting. The racism in the NFL is absolutely disgusting, and it honestly angers me. I've had to calm myself down many times because it is truly disgusting to me that we can't just look at each other as equals and look at resumes, because you guys are so obsessed with these resumes and accolades. But when it comes to being white or black, the only accolade that matters is being white. That being white gives you an advantage because somehow you have this cognitive mindset that is better than a black person. That is proven by your incredibly worse resume. But out of 100 points, the black man's resume is a 79 and yours is a 49 because you're white. But hey, you being white, that's an extra 40 points for you, sir. And you're going to get the job. And you're probably going to go 3-13. We'll probably fire you in 3 years and hire another white dude and have this exact same thing happen. But that's okay because you're not black. And that's disgusting. That's terrible. It is something that needs to be changed. And how Chandler are we going to change this? How are we going to make this just go away? And the best way, the easiest way to do it is with money. And what do I mean by that? Well, every rich person likes extra things for no reason. People love extra bonuses for no reason. But here's a reason: hire black coaches, hire black general managers, hire black head assistant coaches as well. What you do is you incentivize these owners and these teams if they hire black coaches and black general managers and possibly maybe get a black owner. And you're saying, well, that's kind of racist in its stance. And I'm going to say this. If you have ever applied for a job in the United States, you know that you have to fill out certain documents. And there is a equal opportunity document that you fill out. Why is that document a thing? And that is because corporations do not give a fuck about you. Corporations do not care who you are. They don't care the color of your skin. They care because when you write that you are a minority on that, they can say that they care about inclusion, and they can say that they support inclusion, and they will get tax breaks and money because of it. Schools, international students make schools more money. You will go to class in a college and sit next to a kid. You don't even realize the average international student tuition is $26,000. The average in-state tuition for a Florida student is $6,000. Why? Because that person is a minority from a different country and they can get more money from them because they want to be here. Schools and corporations want money from anywhere they can get it for no reason. And inclusion is their excuse to get more money. So incentivize these owners. Hey, extra cap space if you have a black head coach. Extra draft picks if you have a black head coach. Incentivize these people, and I promise you the racism will go away. And when it is a thing of the past and you can prove that racism still is not existence and there's no stigma around it, find other ways to incentivize coaches. Find other ways to make the battlefield balanced again. Because right now it's not. It's not. Owners don't care. Owners just want to do what they're comfortable with. You look like me. We talk the same. I want you, even though you're going to perform poorly. Black head coach comes in. They do good. You get extra draft picks. You're going to win a Super Bowl. What do you know? And it's not an unfair advantage. It is a equal opportunity, and telling these companies, because each franchise is a franchise. It is owned by a specific person. At any point, that person can say, I don't want to pay my franchise fee and I don't want my team a part of the NFL. Can say, hey, this is what I'm doing. Help me make sure our company is more of an equal opportunity company. And then if the NFL says no, then that looks bad on the NFL. That is how you fix this. The best way to a rich man's heart is money. The best way to a rich woman's heart is money. It is just that simple. Give them a little bit more money and they will do whatever you say. That is the way that you're going to fix this issue, and it is not racist because it is what every single corporation does. It is what every single school does. It is what every country does with immigration. Immigration, you have to pay to be an immigrant to a different nation, to a different country. It doesn't matter your color of skin. You just got to pay the government to actually be here. And then you have to prove that you can be here. Black people have to prove that they can be head coaches, and they are not given the opportunity because their resume is not good enough because they are black. The NFL has a serious issue. The NFL has a serious problem, and it needs to be fixed. And I am here to beat this drum, to pound this drum, to agree with the people that need and fight for equality, because it is what I care about. It is what I am passionate about. And if you don't know me as a human being, if you never talked to me as a human being, you wouldn't know that. But I care about this movement. I care about giving people opportunity based on who they are as a human being, not based on the color of their skin. The NFL has a serious problem. Brian Flores is not the problem. This needs to be changed. It needs to be fixed, and the NFL needs to be the people to do it. If they want to inspire change, which is their freaking logo and motto right now for the freaking world, and inspire it from within rather than from going out. You want to inspire change, then show the kids on the street that they can be a head coach in the NFL rather than giving them blankets. That is how you inspire change. By rising people up, not tearing them down. I'm going to close this off with the same quote that I started this with. Morals cannot be legislated, but behavior can be regulated. The law cannot make an employer love me, but it can make him from refusing to hire me because of the color of my skin. Martin Luther King. Happy Black History Month. Change, NFL. Till next time, guys.